To sew buttons on by machine, you'll find a button sew on stitch in the buttonhole menu. Now you won't see it yet, it's right at the bottom. It's stitch 60 and it actually looks like a picture of a button. When you put it on, you're going to notice that the stitch length goes down to 0. So that will make sure that the button isn't moving through. Also the foot number 18 is recommended. I'm going to show you a couple feet that could work in that position, but 18 is the best. It's the button sew on foot. And one other thing I like to do is actually lower the feed dogs down. That'll be done over where and near where your foot control plugs in. So I'm going to lower those down. I like to lower the feed dogs down because then they don't tap up and down on the button. Now this does have a few stitches of locking that's going to happen first. So I'm going to show you some tricks to getting everything lined up based on your button so the swing of the needle matches the holes perfectly. So in a pinch, sometimes I have been known to use foot number 1C, but it's kind of hard to see down through that area of trying to line up the holes underneath a foot and so forth. You could use an open toe foot, sometimes that works, but doesn't always on small buttons. The other foot that you can use other than 18 is a foot number 9. It's kind of carved into the side right here, and it's a darning foot. And that way it actually can sit on top of your button, kind of hop. Well, it will look like it's hopping, but it will perfectly position itself on top of the button and allow your needle to go down through each of the holes. So let's go ahead and let's see here. But let's do it the right way. Foot number 18. Foot number 18, you do notice, has 2 gripper toes. So that's nice as we go to stabilize it on a small button or even a big button, for example. And it also has this little tiny pin built into the machine, and that will allow for a little extra thread to form, making it buttonable to an item. Now if this button was more decorative and was not a button, we don't need it to be a little floppy because of that extra kind of shank of thread it creates. So you can actually take this screw over here on this side, loosen it, it'll come out, and then actually swing this finger up and out of the way, and then you reattach it down here, down at the bottom, and see where it holds the finger? Holds it up and out of the way. So that would be where you would want it to be if this was going to be decorative. But for today, I am going to put that back into position. That finger does not leave the foot, so it actually is kind of on its own little hinge. That's nice, then you don't ever lose it. Okay, button that back down. And by the way, it can be actually raised or lowered, so if you need more shank of thread or less shank of thread. So I'm going to make sure that's all the way down. I've tightened it so it's at its lowest position as we stitch. Now you're probably looking at these buttons and realizing, well gosh, that one's big and that one's small. Is how do we know what size of width to stitch? Now if we actually line up the small button and the big button, see the light coming through? It's an optical illusion, and where you can see that actually is the same width that will work for both buttons actually. All right, 4 holes versus 2 holes. People always ask that too. For this, you're just going to do the front 2 full first, and then move back and do the second 2 at a separate time, and you'll see why you'll want to do the front 2 first. But if you just have 2, you just go for it. Notice the needle is also hanging out over here on the left side, so I'm going to turn my hand wheel towards me and sink my needle down into the button, lower my presser foot down. Now here's where you probably don't want your needle stopping in the down position, so I'm going to go ahead and stitch 1, and wait till the needle jumps over to the other side. Once it does, I'm going to hand turn and make sure that that goes in without any problem so I don't break a needle. So it did a few locking stitches on the left. Now it's going back and forth a few times, and then it'll do some locking stitches and go until it stops. You can also use your thread cutter in here, so it will pick a hole and go down. Now this is why you always want to do your front 2 holes first, because that little shank of thread is on that pin. So instead of taking it all the way off, all we have to do is really just slide back just a little bit and then realign the needle eyes, or the needle with the eyes of the button, and make sure that it goes back and forth the right amount of times, locking stitches, and a cut. And we have a very secure button. Slide it all the way towards you. And there we go. We have our buttons sewn on. A little bit of fray check is nice to seal those threads, but this one you can definitely cut right off because it is well secured. Now, if you have lowered your feed dogs for this operation, go ahead and make sure that they are brought back up. Remember, when you push that box back in near your foot, you might need to take a stitch for them to come back. Actually, these came back up automatically, so we are ready to go. All right, sewing on buttons, super easy. I do recommend that foot 18 because it is the easiest way to go with those little grippers on the side of the feet, and I can see where I'm lining up my holes.